If you clicked on this video, I can only assume it's because you love watching eyeshadow palette collection videos as much as I do. I do. Lucky you, that's exactly what I'm going to be bringing you today. This video is part of my sharing my makeup collection video series. It was sort of my intro series into YouTube by way to just kind of share with you my makeup products so that you can become familiar with my taste, my style, what sort of products I have. You know, I don't know about you, but the majority of the YouTubers that I follow, they have the same makeup preferences as I do. So my thought was I was just gonna throw myself out there in hopes that I would find others similar to me that like the same stuff I do. I also think that it's helpful because then you can see what a person has and ask their reviews, ask their thoughts on certain products. Because let's be real here, there is a shit ton of makeup on the market. And if we can band together and talk about what's good and what's bad, that's the kind of support I think we need here. So the majority of the videos within this series have been a ranking. I also did do a declutter for my lip product video. This one for my eyeshadows.
I really wanted to do a ranking.
And that is why I have put off doing it for so long, because I struggled so hard to rank them. But in the end, I couldn't rank them.
I just can't do it, Captain. I don't have the power.
I don't know if I said this yet, but I have a lot of eyeshadow.
I have a lot.
A lot. Upwards of, I think I counted like 47 palettes, something in that area. So what I've done instead is I've created this very long video sharing with you my eyeshadow palette collection. With each palette, if I have swatch pictures and pictures of looks that I've done with the palette, I've included them also. I also swatch as I go. I've also included timestamps below for you for each section of this video and also for each individual palette. So if you're only interested in hearing my thoughts, my opinions, maybe seeing swatches on certain palettes, that's there for you, because I want this video to be not only entertaining to you, of course, because we have this in common that we love watching eyeshadow palette collection videos, but I want this video to be helpful and as resourceful to you as possible. So the way I've divided up this video is the first few palettes are palettes that I'm actually decluttering, and then the middle portion are all the rest of my palettes, and then the last portion are my top 10 favorite palettes for one reason or another, whether they're my favorite because of the way they make me feel when I use them, or because of the creativity they spark in me, or because it's a palette that I use most often. Whatever the reason is, it's in my top 10. So anyway, all that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I would love to start a conversation about eyeshadow palettes down below, what your favorite ones are, what your thoughts are on the ones that I love, you know, anything and everything about eyeshadow palettes. I love eyeshadow, obviously, that's why I'm creating this video for you. And I hope that you feel the same, because obviously that's why you're here watching, right? So anyway, I want to thank you in advance for watching. I hope you enjoy. First, let's go over the palettes that I'm going to be decluttering, and the first one here is the e.l.f. 18 Hit Wonders eyeshadow palette. This one, as with the other three that I'm going to be showing you, there's nothing wrong with the palettes, honestly. They're actually really good quality, especially for eyeshadow palettes you can find in the drugstore. I find it's hard to find a decent quality eyeshadow palette, especially one that offers a variety of colors like this one. It's just I'm not really using it a whole lot. Aside from that, the mattes here, they're okay. These four primary colors are a little bit tricky to work with, a little bit patchy. However, these shimmers are incredible. This silver is blinding, beautiful.
Incredible.
This greenish, yellowish red is one of my favorite eyeshadow colors of all time, and they did it very well in this palette. Classic red green color that's in a lot of higher end palettes. They did it beautifully in this e.l.f. palette. If you are looking for a colorful eyeshadow palette and you don't want to pay a ton of money, I would recommend it to you. The next one is the e.l.f. Opposites Attract eyeshadow palette. I did do a tutorial using this palette. I really do like this one though. I like that you've got the warm and the cool tones. This mauve is one of my favorite shades in the entire palette. This color is pretty cool. It's like a white iridescent pink shade, really beautiful for inner corner or brow bone highlight. These shimmers, especially in all four of these e.l.f. palettes, are amazing. The mattes in this one are better quality than the 18 Hit Wonders palette, in my opinion. I'm just not using it, man. And if someone else will, then I'm gonna let them have it. If no one wants to take it from me, no friends, no family members, then I'll add it back to my collection and resume using it. Next, the e.l.f. The New Classics. Again, beautiful palette, beautiful neutral color story. A lot more mattes than the shimmers, but again, they're beautiful. This peachy Iridescent pink is one of my favorites in this palette. This cool yellow gold green is really fun, as is this light sage green, so pretty. My last e.l.f. palette that I'm going to be decluttering is this one. This is from their holiday collection from 2 or 3 years ago. They released 3 eyeshadow palettes. They were called Sugar Spice and Everything Nice. I can't remember which one this is. The name isn't on here anywhere. But anyway, just like the other 3 that I showed you, really beautiful formula. I'm actually a little bit, still kind of torn up about giving this one away because this one is it's really pretty. I really like this burgundy shade. Deep, beautiful red brown. I really like this pinky shade. It's like a light, it's much more flaky, much more like a topper, but it's a beautiful baby champagne pink. This one is kind of like a fuchsia purplish color. Just fun pinks, and I find that they all have a place in here. They're all pretty unique, got a nice mix of cool tones, which is hard to find when doing pink palettes. Oh, this peachy one is one of my favorites too. Anyway, very beautiful palette. Next, I have the NYX Perfect Filter eyeshadow palette in Gloomy Days. NYX eyeshadow formula is really hit or miss for me, which is really unfortunate because they come up with some really cool and unique color stories. I don't know if they're just so firmly pressed. You don't get a whole lot of pigment when you go to apply it on your eyes. I mean, this one swatches really well. They're not as pigmented as I prefer to work with. They take a bit of building up. They don't have quite as long lasting power in my opinion. If you're drawn to this color story, I just know that this formula is very light. It takes a lot to be built up. If you like that, you'll enjoy it. If you don't, I would maybe pass because I believe this palette is like $15 or $16. I did get mine on sale. I paid less than 10 bucks for it, so I'm not super heartbroken to be getting rid of it. But anyway, quite unfortunate because again, this color story is really pretty. You've got that dark gloomy blue, this iridescent white pink, this beautiful greigey mauve. Such cool colors in here. The last palette that I have set aside to get rid of is the BH Cosmetics Solar Flare palette. I wanted this palette for
so long.
And then BH had a sale, I believe last summer on their website. I got this for like $5 and was so excited. And then I got it and used it a couple of times and haven't really reached for it since. And I don't know why, because all these colors in here are totally my color. I love baked eyeshadows. I love the way that they appear on the eyes. I've got this beautiful chocolate brown. I mean, look at that. Look at that metallicness. That's incredible. And then especially if you use these wet, they're amazing.
Oh, look at it.
This color's cool. It's like a yellow pinky color. I mean, you have some really fun, pretty unique shades. And I don't know why I don't ever use this eyeshadow palette. Anyway, I'm just going to offer it out to someone. If someone takes it, it can get more use out of it. I will feel good in my heart. If no one wants it, then I guess it's meant to stay with me. All right, that is all of the palettes that I have set aside to declutter for now. So let's move into the rest of my palette collection. Let's finish up what I have for e.l.f. eyeshadow palettes. The one that I'm keeping is the e.l.f. Earth and Ocean palette. Greens and blues are tricky for me, especially blues. I don't wear blues a whole lot. Greens are a little bit more fun, but I love the tones of greens and blues in this palette. I find that they're very, I'm going to use the word wearable. I know that any color is wearable, but for me, some colors are more daunting than others, and these blues and greens, being that they're colors that intimidate me quite a bit, these are workable for me, and I enjoy using this palette even though I don't wear these colors super often. When I want to wear a green or a blue, I always pull this palette out. This brownish green and this yellowish brown are like those beautiful, delicious, poopy greens that I lust after.
Look at them. Delish.
And then this palette also has 2 topper type eyeshadows that feel very similar to a Colourpop Super Shock. This Tundra shade and this Lagoon. Oh, they're so fun to work into an eye look. This one is like a silver sparkle. You can build up to be super opaque and silver and blinding, or just a light wash of some shimmer. And then this one is similar to that one, just, you know, more blue. But it's not like crazy blue. It's not intimidating blue, which is why I love this palette so much. These other blue shades, I really like this Underwater shade. It's like a murky, like darkened teal. It's so pretty. All right, and to conclude my e.l.f. palettes, I have two of their bite size, this one in Truffle and this one in Rosewater, I believe. Okay, so I know everyone loves these. Here's the thing, they are good. For $3 especially, they're good. The quality, the performance of these shadows, awesome. Especially, you know, like compared to NYX, their eyeshadow palettes are anywhere from 10 to, what is it, 40 bucks? That's insane. That's
Insane.
This is a reliable formula. However, at one point I had 4 of these. The 2 that I no longer have, both of them broke. And I'm very careful with my palettes. I have a nice organization storage set up for all of my palettes. I'm very careful with them. And the fact that they broke really busts my buttons, right? And this one, my favorite color in this palette broke also. They're very fragile. And so, you know, even for $3, that still kind of upsets me because I had 4 of them. That's still almost 15 bucks. So I don't know. I feel like they get a lot of hype for good reason. Again, they're $3, good formula. But I've got other eyeshadow palettes in my collection that I'm going to show you that even though they're a couple dollars more, I would recommend going that route instead of getting these. Because again, like I said, by the time you get 4 or 5 of these, that's, you know, 15 bucks when you can buy a nice palette that I'll show you here shortly. That is just as good, if not better, in my opinion. So anyway, I'm keeping these 2 for now. They're decent enough to have. I'm not going to throw them out for no reason. So I guess until they break, I'm gonna keep them. Next up, I have 2 eyeshadow palettes from the brand Undone Beauty. This one is in Bare, and this one with the greens is in Soft. I did do a video on my channel talking all about Undone Beauty, demonstrating a bunch of products that I have. So if you're interested in the brand and more about these palettes, I recommend you go check out that video. I do enjoy these. I find that they are a unique formula. I do think that they are missing matte shades. So again, I always have to work in another palette to get a complete eye look, but I think they're nice. And every time I use them, I enjoy the experience of using them. I find that both of these have really good one and done eyeshadows. This one, this like yellowish, goldish color is really pretty. These shadows can be used both wet or dry, so used dry, they're much more subtle, but if you add water or some sort of mixing medium, they really start to pop and are just blinding. I mean, especially, I'm going to show you this white shade here.
Oh, mama.
These greens are really cool. A lot of these colors are just really cool and unique colors that I don't find in the drugstore. So even though they're not my most used palettes, the formula is a little bit finicky to work with. I think these colors are really cool and unique. Next, I have this palette from Flower Beauty. It is their Jungle Lights palette. It is supposed to have 6 shades that are more like topper shades. They're like that soft, bouncy type formula. So when I ordered this, I ordered it from Ulta and it came to me, this shade here is supposed to be like a dark purple. It came shattered, which was quite unfortunate because there's still purple flecks all over in the other shades. I thought about returning it and getting a new one. However, of all the shades to break in here, that color, that purple one, was one that I wouldn't probably use ever. So I thought I would rather just keep it than go get a new one because they're just gonna throw this away, and that just doesn't make sense, you know? I'm not missing anything in my life from not having that shade. So anyway, I kept it and it's been fine. I really enjoy using this for toppers.
Oh my gosh.
They're incredible.
They're blinding.
They're insane. I cannot believe the quality of this palette. That color is one of my favorites. Beautiful pinky mauve topper shade. These look high-end and they feel high-end. They give your eyelid that glossy wet look. I think this palette is a little bit more expensive, especially if we're talking drugstore. I believe it's $17 or $18, but oh boy, they're so beautiful. This is the palette that I reach for quite often if I'm not sure what I want to do for my eyes that day. Just whip on one of these bad boys, add in a transition shade, and voila. You look like you did a lot for not much. Let's talk about this one from Colourpop. So I have many
Many.
Colourpop eyeshadow palettes. However, I have depotted all of them and put them in to magnetic palettes, kind of created my own palettes with them. I did a video talking about my makeup organization and how I go about doing all this. I'll link it in the description box below if you're interested. But this is the only Colourpop palette that I have not depotted because I think it's quite unique on its own, and I just can't bring myself to take it apart. It's so
cool.
To me, this is one of their most unique eyeshadow palettes they've ever done, and I enjoy the looks that I get with this. I think these colors are just really cool. I don't feel that my camera is going to be able to do these shades and these duochromes much justice. This one here is like a reddened blue, very light, very beautiful. This one is similar, just a bit deeper. Oh my gosh, I just love working with this. And again, the looks that I end up creating with this palette are just, they're so fun and they're so unique. And this packaging, I'm not a sucker for packaging. I don't give a crap about makeup packaging, to be quite honest. As long as it's functional and it doesn't get in the way, I don't really care. But something about this packaging to me is just lovely. Another reason why I haven't taken it apart. It's embossed, and these beautiful flower decals are also a little bit embossed. The colors on here, again, it's just a whole mood, it's a whole vibe. Oh, they killed it with this release. Let's talk about this one. This palette is mega old. I mean, it's new to me. I got this probably a couple months ago, but this palette was released probably years ago. This is one of the palettes that I was talking about, that instead of getting those e.l.f. bite-sized palettes, I recommend just getting something like this, because this, I feel, has such a better range of colors to create a more full eye look. This palette almost made it into my top 10, if I'm being honest. It was real neck and neck there for a while, but it didn't. I like having mid-tone ranges for my crease and these deeper shades to deepen up my outer corner. I like to have a variety of shimmers for my lid shade. I love this deepened red brown. You know, the formula of this is good for drugstore. It's a little bit more reliable and consistent throughout the entire palette. I think it's incredibly underrated. I got this palette because I wanted the Urban Decay Naked Heat. I was really drawn to those warm tones. It was a hole that was missing in my vast eyeshadow collection, to be honest, and this far exceeded my needs, and I no longer want the Urban Decay Heat because I have this one and it is just beautiful. So anyway, this is the only Rimmel palette that I've tried, so I don't know if the quality is the same amongst all of them. I know they've got a few different of these Magnif'eyes palettes. This is just the Spice Edition, and I highly recommend it if you are drawn to this color story. All right, let's get into my Morphe palettes. I have 3 of them here. The first one being just this little guy. This is the Morphe 3B. I use this one quite a bit, to be honest. These 3 shades are just your basic everyday neutrals. So I'll go ahead and just swatch all 3 of them for you. Kinda Natural is just this mid-tone brown. Velvet is a little bit more pinky, peachy. I find that with my skin tone and my blue eyes, this sort of peachy color is very complementary. And then this last shade, Deep Hue, is just a deeper, dark, rich brown. Just a palette that, when I get back to traveling, is one that I would be taking with me because, again, they're just your staple neutral mattes. And I find that the performance of this has been better than any of the Morphe palettes that I've ever tried, including the 2 that I'm about to show you. Just very consistent amongst the 3. They're very pigmented, easy to work with. I have the Morphe 9S So Chill palette. This one was in my declutter pile, but I ended up pulling it out shortly after placing it in Purgatory. There's just something about these shades that I guess I'm just frequently drawn to. One of my absolute favorite eyeshadows that, if I were to do a video on like my favorite single eyeshadows, my favorite one and done type eyeshadows, this would be in there for sure. This is the first one that I would think of. It's just like this beautiful taupe, but it's got so much beautiful micro glitter in there. It's almost like a brownish blue with silver and baby blue glitter reflex. It's just, once you build it up on your eyelids, it's
magnificent.
And I get compliments on this eyeshadow every time that I wear it. Again, I don't think the camera's gonna do this one much justice, but it's just one of my favorites. Anyway, these blues in here are okay. I don't wear them a whole lot. I have reached for them a couple times. Something about this color story sometimes makes me want to put a blue on my outer corner, and these work just fine. Again, just another really cool, unique color story. Next up, this is the Morphe 35C Everyday Chic palette. This is actually the newest palette to my palette collection. This came out last summer, I think, and Every once in a while, there is a palette color story that just catches my eye. It's absolutely love at first sight, and this was one of them. However, I scoffed it off because I just don't like big palettes like this, and Morphe's formula isn't my favorite. But anyway, this palette just kind of kept pulling on my heartstrings, and I finally just caved and purchased it, and I
love it.
I really, truly love it. I'm so glad that I finally got it. Again, even though this formula isn't my favorite, I do wish they're a little bit more pigmented, and a lot of these shimmers are more like topper shades than true shimmers or metallics. But there's just something about this color story that brings out creativity in me like no other. Even though I've only had it for I think 2 or 3 weeks, I have loved using it. I've loved the eye looks that I've created with it. It's just this color story inspires me deeply. There is one pressed glitter in here, which I don't mind. I love glitter. If you're new here,
Hi, I'm Casey. I love glitter.
anyway, I am so glad that I got this palette. I have 3 BH Cosmetics palettes that I'm keeping. This one, Beautiful in Barcelona, was in Purgatory, but again, just like that Morphe palette, I ended up pulling this one out. And okay, so here's the thing. Even looking at it now, I'm like, there's just something about this color story that doesn't do it for me. It's just, ugh. Like, it doesn't inspire me. I look at this and I don't know what to do with it, which is why I was gonna get rid of it.
However,
these shades as individual shades are exquisite. Magnificent, magical, buttery. This shade, Decay, is one of my absolute favorite shadows in my collection. It's just this deep, plummy mauve color. It's like velvet, truly like velvet on your eyes. It's amazing.
oh my goodness gracious.
This blue, even though I don't like blues, it's like a powdery, I can feel like glitter flecks as I'm picking it up on my finger.
Yowza.
So it's a black and blue, and then it's got tons of baby blue micro glitter. Oh my gosh, it's dazzling. But I don't know, it's just weird to like this pop of orange is just kind of weird and random. This one and some of these like orange tones to me are just like kind of spicy, and I don't really know what to do with them because all the other shades in this palette are like soft and romantic. And so I think it's some of these warmer tones that just really throw me off and turn me off from using this palette. But again, it's those individual shades that are just, oh, I can't give up this palette because they're just too fantastic. Hangin in Hawaii, this one also almost made it to my top 10. And this one was another one of those type of palettes that as soon as I saw the color story, there was just something about it that connected with me on a deep personal level and kept calling my name. And I finally went through with it and purchased it and have had no regrets since. It's so incredibly basic, but it's just such an easy palette to work with. The thing that I love most about this palette is I find that there oftentimes, even just a basic neutral eyeshadow palette are always, for me, missing like the perfect mid-tone brown, like the perfect taupey brown, something that's not too cool, not too warm, not too dark, just like perfect. And whenever I'm needing a shade, I pull out this palette because it's guaranteed to have it. It has just a nice variety of light to medium to dark mid-tone browns, warm tones, and cool tones. This Mauve shade is one that I reach for a lot. It's just the perfect mid-tone taupe. And they're all different. Like sometimes when you get a neutral palette like this and they've got a variety of browns, mid-tone colors, whatever, you used to watch them and there's not a whole lot of difference between them, but this palette is just so well done. Call me crazy, but there is a difference between all of these browns and these topper shades. These ivory shimmers are all just beautiful, gorgeous, dazzling in the typical creamy, velvety BH formula.
Oh my gosh.
I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking the same. And then of course these corals and these pinks, as I said earlier, with my skin tone and my hair color, I just find that these colors are just so beautiful and complementary. And my last BH palette, I got this in an Ipsy pop-up sale actually for, I want to say like 12 bucks, when normally I think it retailed for almost 30. Anyway, this was part of BH's holiday collection 2020. They released the Naughty palette, this bigger palette, and then the Nice palette was a little bit smaller. And at first I was really turned off by this because again, it's a mega huge palette and it overwhelms my brain, but I love it. And I'm so glad that I bought it during the pop-up sale because I love all of these shades. And this one is replacing my e.l.f. 18 Hit Wonders, that really colorful palette. I think it was the first palette that I showed you. This one is replacing that because I find that I have a lot of the same colors. I've got this orange, this red, this blue, And I much prefer the BH formula. Their shimmers are always buttery and smooth. I mean, look at that. That's like liquid metal. It's so delicious. The shade Decked Out, even though I know it's a neutral, look at that though. It's like liquid metal. That's insane.
Are you serious?
BH, are you serious? I'm gonna throw in the Lime Crime Greatest Hits Bangers next because this was also a holiday 2020 collection. So I had never tried anything from Lime Crime before. I don't know, this one just called to me. And again, this packaging, like I said,
I don't give a heck about packaging.
but there's just something about this one that is just exquisite to me. It's beautiful, it's girly, it's vintage looking. My understanding is that all of these eyeshadows are already existing amongst Lime Crime palettes. They were selected by people like you and me, some of their favorite eyeshadows, and they just put them all into a palette. So that's probably the only thing that I struggle with is that to me, I open this and I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what to do. I know what to do with these mauves. Of course, those are the colors that I reach for the most. Those are easy for me to work with, but some of these more interesting colors like this Flora, this Jam, I sometimes struggle with. So this is another one that I reach for when I want to play with color, when I have a little bit more time to play. I wish that I had a little bit more creativity in my brain when I open this and that the looks would just free flow out of me. I have to work a little bit mentally when I use this palette, but I've always loved everything that I've created with it, so I'm very happy to have it. The only thing that I'll say, these shades, these more topper shimmery shades are like topper shades. They're not ultra pigmented, which is a little bit disappointing. I wish that they were. I know a lot of people complained about this palette because of that specifically. You know, like this Myth. This Myth, it looks like it's a beautiful iridescent golden green, and it just takes a lot to pick up. I do wish that they were just straight up metallics. That would make this palette so much more fun, so much better. But there is a place in my collection for topper shades like this. I do still enjoy working with them. So anyway, given this formula and given how expensive Lime Crime palettes are, I don't know that I'll be quick to jump on purchasing another Lime Crime palette in the future. I'm happy to have this one, but it's not my favorite formula to work with. It left me wanting a little bit more. So moving forward, I will probably hesitate to purchase another Lime Crime palette in the future. Next up, another recent purchase. This is Makeup Revolution, the Friends X Revolution, the one with eyeshadow palette. I purchased this specifically for the Makeup with Friends series on my channel. And I've used it a couple times. You know, I really like the color variety in here. However, I had a really difficult time with the mattes. And so this is again another one that I have to have a little bit more time, a little bit more patience to work with. To be honest, I am a stickler when it comes to collabs like this because I feel that a lot of them are just money grabs, but I think that Makeup Revolution did a good job with the Friends collections because they seem to be releasing multiple of them. This one, I think the names are really, really cute. They've got all the Friends names in here. They've got highlighters here. This is Ugly Naked Guy, Mr. Heckles, Estelle, Fun Bobby. They just did a decent job. I felt like there was actually a little bit more thought put into the Friends collections, which I'm very grateful for. So I'm glad that they did a good job with that. So anyway, I'll swatch a couple of these for you. This olive green is probably one of my favorite shades in the palette, just really unique. Mindy is really cute also. It's like a salmony, blushy, corally color. I'll try to do some of these mattes for you. Ursula, this blue, a little bit patchy. Phoebe, this orange. Same thing. They're just, it's almost like they don't have like a glide on the eyes. It's almost like you lay it down and it just settles in there. It doesn't blend out super well. So you have to work with it, kind of build it up. Anyway, pretty color story, lots of fun colors. The shimmers perform great. The highlighters are beautiful. It's just the mattes that are unfortunately a little bit tricky to work with. If this is something that caught your eye and you were kind of debating on whether or not you should pick it up, honestly, I would say pass because the mattes just don't do it for me. I think there are far better palettes out there with beautiful shimmers, with a beautiful color story, with mattes that perform just as well. So Even though I'm glad to have it, I guess it's one that I found that I have only reached for once or twice for doing my makeup with friends videos. So let's talk about this one from CColor. This is their Unisex 3 palette. This was, again, one of those palettes that for whatever reason just caught my eye. I was just really attracted to these colors. This green is like the perfect pukey green shade that is just everything that my heart desires when I want to play with a green. These blues even though I'm not really a fan of blue, there's just something about these these specific shades of blue that really draw me in. This formula is quite powdery, as you can see here, but the pigmentation is there. I don't really care too much about follow because there's ways of fixing that. So if you are like me and just want a shadow that's pigmented, this is surprisingly a really good formula. This shade, even though it doesn't look like much at all, is probably the one I use the most. It's the most perfect transition shade. My hands are wet, so that's why it's mudding up right there. It's so soft and buttery, and they apply well. Again, they are powdery, but I would rather a powdery eyeshadow than a non-pigmented eyeshadow. Even these shimmers, this copper, oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I did purchase mine on Amazon. I got it for like $7, I want to say. You can also order directly from the CColor website. This is the only CColor palette that I've ever tried, so I don't know if their formula is universal amongst all of their palettes. They are known to be a duping brand that'll dupe more higher end palettes, but anyway, I love this one. This is the Shaina B Miami eyeshadow palette. This is one I did receive from Ipsy.
I freaking stinking love this palette.
All of these mattes down here perform dreamy, beautiful. They're buttery, they're soft, they're pigmented. This is another palette that I'm just needing something quick on the go, one that I reach for just because it's such a reliable formula. This orange, this rusty, beautiful pumpkin orange is so sexy. I love the mattes. These shimmers are also fantastic. This beautiful copper, beautiful, beautiful green. I believe I mentioned this in my fall favorites video just because these colors are just your basic neutrals any time of year, but there's something about this, especially, you know, that orange that I've talked about. And I would be very interested to try more from this brand, especially their eyeshadows. This palette is fantastic. This is another palette that I received from Ipsy. This one also almost made it into my top 10. I don't have a good reason for why it didn't, because it's beautiful. They did an outstanding job with this color story, incorporating a nice variety of light to dark shades. This is another palette that is so easy to create a full look out of this one palette. And these shimmers are really cool. They're different textures also. Tease is just kind of like your basic copper metallic shade. Moxie is more of a beautiful rose gold. This Hex shade is sort of like a topper. It's a little bit more crumbly, a little bit more shimmery. Oh, I love this palette. Again, another brand that I'd be curious to try more from, another brand that I've never heard another person talk about aside from receiving this palette from Ipsy. So they did a great job with this neutral eyeshadow palette. I love it. I have a mini Huda Beauty Mauve Obsessions palette. I love this one. I also had the Smoke Obsessions. I like this one better just for the range of shades. I find that her formula is super pigmented, and anytime that I am in the mood to wear these tones, I always pull this one out. Again, she's got a beautiful range here. One of my faves. And I got this one from a friend, so it's even more meaningful to me. This is the Kat Von D Lolita palette. This one almost made it in my top 10 also, because this is one that I pull for a lot when I'm wanting this color story. Again, it's the range of shades in here. So these are all mattes, but when I'm in the mood for burgundies or mauves, this one always gets pulled out. This formula isn't my favorite formula to work with, in all honesty. The formula is very powdery, a little bit finicky to work with, but I love it. And I don't know that the palette is available anymore, being that Kat Von D has been rebranded. So I feel lucky to have this in my collection because it's one that gets used often. Next, I have two palettes from Melt Cosmetics. My makeup journey has really come a long way in the past couple of years. Melt Cosmetics used to be a brand that to me seemed untouchable because there's no way in hell that I would ever bring myself to pay, what is it, $65 for an eyeshadow palette. But, you know, times have changed for me. I have really grown, apparently, in the past couple of years. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And not only do I have one, but two Melt Cosmetics eyeshadow palettes. Heck, I even have a Pat McGrath palette here that I'm going to be showing you shortly. Anyway, this is again one of those color stories that the first time that I saw pictures of it, it melted inside my heart. I ended up getting this on sale at Sephora actually for like 35 bucks. I love it. When I open this, it excites me. The only thing that I'll say, the Melt formula is so fragile.
Ah, fragile. It must be Italian.
Well, I think that says fragile, honey.
Oh, yeah.
This one's already starting to crumble. And another thing, if we're talking packaging alone, this is my absolute least favorite palette. Oh my gosh, it's terrible. It's so bad.
It's so bad.
So I still have the original box that it comes in. For some reason, I don't know, I just store it in this. I think because the formula is so fragile that I want to do everything that I can to protect it. So not only does it fold up like a book, with these individual plastic pieces here to separate the colors, because they are crumbly, they will get and bleed into each other. I don't want that to happen. So I need to have those. I need to close it up as a book, and then I put it back in its box home, and that's how it's stored all the time. And because of that finicky packaging, it deters me from pulling from this palette more than I think I probably would otherwise. It makes me so mad when brands try to get creative with their packaging like that. I want my packaging to be basic. I want it to be functional. I want it to be easy to work with. I don't want the fancy stuff, man. And it's just crying shame because this palette is so beautiful. Of the two Melt palettes that I have, this formula is better, in my opinion. Anyway, I love it. I'm happy to have it. Like I said, if it weren't for the packaging, this probably would be ranking much higher. It would be used a heck of a lot more. It's still a color story that excites me and inspires me when I want to play with color. My second Melt palette is the Rust palette. This one I did pay full price for this one. Oh my, I think that makes this the most expensive eyeshadow palette I've ever purchased. Wow. Need to have a moment here to soak that in. This one also almost made it to my top 10. The only reason it really didn't is because it's not my favorite formula to work with, specifically the shimmers. I don't know, they're just they're not as poppin' as I would think that Melt shimmers would be. And because I am a shimmer girl, it's important to me that the formula of shimmers is rockin'. But aside from that, I mean, this packaging, again, being someone who doesn't give a crap about packaging, this is beautiful. I love these shades, this shade Rubbish. There's a story behind this shade. Do you want to hear it? Okay, I'll tell it to you. So one of my favorite YouTubers, Mariah Leonard, I was watching one of her, I think it was her eyeshadow collection video actually, and she talked about the shade Rubbish and how it was the absolute perfect pukey mid-tone brown, a beautiful, basic, all over the lid type shade, and I wanted it.
I wanted it bad.
It will be mine. Oh yes, it will be mine.
And it was before the Rust palette was available. It was when it was just the Rust stack. And there was no way in hell that I was going to pay however much it was for the Rust stack for this one shadow alone. And then I think to just purchase this single shadow, I think it was like 17 bucks. And again, that was just too high of a price that I'd be willing to pay for a single shadow. Even now, I still don't think I would pay $17 for a single powder eyeshadow. That seems like a lot. Anyway, so I was on a hunt for a long time trying to find the perfect dupe for the shade Rubbish. I found it. I came pretty close. I think it was the MAC Uninterrupted shade. That is the closest dupe that I was able to find. And actually, let me just grab it quick. I'll swatch it. So this is the MAC Uninterrupted shade. I'll swatch it on top here. It's pretty stinking close, is it not? I mean, once it's on your eyes, you're probably not gonna tell a difference. So anyway, it looks like I found my winning dupe, but it was the shade Rubbish that started the whole love affair with the Rust palette. Once Melt turned the stack into a palette, it was one of those palettes that I just had to have. It had a place in my heart already, and it just needed a place in my home. And I don't know what made me break down and buy it, because like I said, I paid full price for it. It had to have been a spur of the moment, unconscious blackout, treat myself moment.
What do we treat ourselves to? Clothes.
Treat yourself.
Fragrances.
Treat yourself.
Massages.
Treat yourself.
Mimosas.
Treat yourself.
Fine leather goods.
Treat yourself.
It's the best day of the year.
The best day of the year!
That I honestly don't regret. Even though I said I don't love the shimmers, I still love using this eyeshadow palette. I still love the looks that I create with it. It's still a beautiful formula. It's still a beautiful palette. See, like this rabbit shade should be like a beautiful, rich, dark chocolate brown, and it's just not quite there. This one too should be like the BH formula. If these shimmers were like the BH formula shimmers, oh my gosh, this palette would be everything. But there's just something about them that they're just not quite as poppin' as I want them to be. This one's pretty close. This one's pretty on the eyes, but these two, they're just kind of dull, aren't they? Anyway, I still freaking love this palette. It's just, for that reason, it didn't make my top 10. Next, I have the Urban Decay Naked Honey palette, another palette that the moment I laid eyes on it, it was love at first sight. I purchased this from QVC. I did get it on sale, and I have a weird relationship with this palette because I love it. When I open it, it makes me feel excited. But when I sit down to do my makeup, this palette is never the first one that I reach for. It's like I have to open it to remind myself that this palette is magical. Otherwise, it's like it's in my memory as something that is just kind of boring. But then when I open it, it's magical. But then I close it and I forget about it and I remember that it's boring. But then I reopen it and I'm like,
Oh my god, this palette is beautiful, let's use it.
so that's the way it always goes for me. And when I do open it and play with it, I have loved every single look that I've created with this palette. This shade Amber is one of my favorite one and done shadows. This vibrancy, this metallicness does something to me deeply. The only thing that I'll say, this shade Queen is supposed to be like an olive dirty green, and it's pretty lackluster in my opinion. I was pretty disappointed the day that I used that all over my lids.
It just kind of is like meh.
This honey shade is, I feel, also the same. Just not quite as vavoomy as I wish that it would be. But the mattes in here perform beautifully. The majority of the shimmers are quite beautiful. Buttery, smooth, metallic. Anyway, just a beautiful, beautiful neutral palette that for whatever reason I always forget how much I love until I open it and feel inspired to play with it. Next I have the Sigma Cor De Rosa. This palette I also have a weird relationship with because while I love it, there's something about it that when I open it, I get stuck. There's a couple shades in here that I don't really know what to do with that I wish just weren't in here. One of them being this pink shade. Another one being this Shakespeare. I do love a deep burgundy, but this is almost like a pinky burgundy. I don't know, I just wish it was more of like a dark red brown. Aside from that, oh, this dark nightshade also, I don't know, there's just something about this color story that just doesn't quite, leaves me feeling confused, but yet I love all the colors individually. This is my only Sigma palette, my first time trying the Sigma eyeshadow formula, and it's beautiful, buttery smooth. This shade High Society is one of my favorites. Oh, look how buttery that goes on. It's so, so nice. And these two shimmers are Magnetic, Belle of the Ball. And then this one, Sunsprite, is gold. They're both definitely more like toppers. But anyway, again, like I said, there's just something about the color story. I think it's too warm of a color story. I wish it was just a little bit toned down, and I think I would find it to be more approachable. It's almost a little bit intimidating when I open this up because of the bright pink, that bright orange, this bold pinkish burgundy. It's almost a little bit too overwhelming to me. I would love to try more palettes from Sigma. I wish I would have chosen a different one, to be honest, just because this one is just a little bit too warm toned for me. I have a couple of Pat McGrath palettes to share with you. These two minis, I can't remember what these were called. The Ecstacy palettes, so this one is in Subversive and this one is in Sublime. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that all of these colors are currently available in a Mothership palette They were just reduced and put into these minis. This one obviously being more colorful. I love this one. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm definitely more drawn to neutrals. So of course, I love this one more. This shade right here is really another one that if I were to do like a top 10 Undone eyeshadows, this one would be included. It's so cool. It's like a pewterish white gold. It's like a, I don't even know how to describe it. It's so beautiful. When I don't know what to do with my eye look, it's one that I reach for and pop on all over my lid, or it's a beautiful one as a halo eye. This basic bronze shade is also fantastic. Yeah, I love this one. Beautiful. This one I don't use quite as much, but again, they're beautiful colors. I think these are already pretty affordable, and then I got them for half off. I was looking at them for a long time and they seem to go on sale quite a bit. So if you are attracted to either of these or both of them, wait until they go on sale. She will often put them on sale for half off. I mean, look at that blue.
That's insane.
That is insane. No patchiness. I'm not really crazy about wearing yellow golds on my eye. They're a little bit, I have to be, it's a certain mood, right? But when I'm looking to play and I'm serious about playing, I will reach into this one. Wow. I also have the Pat McGrath Mothership Subliminal Platinum Bronze Palette. This one I believe I got this one for half off. I only paid $35 for it, and oh, I love it. Again, if you haven't caught on by now, these shades speak to me on a very deep level. The only reason this didn't get put in top 10, to be quite honest, is because they're just a little bit lackluster, and there's only one matte shade in here. So again, it's one that I would have to use another palette with, but this shade obviously is one of my favorites. Just a beautiful plummy, mauve, taupey.
Oh my gosh.
This one is like a beautiful, again, like that pewter, like cool tone taupey shade. Delicious all over the lid. This shade, this burgundy shade, is just amazing quality. Oh, yeah, I love it. And my last palette before we get into the top 10 is the Nabla Side by Side Nude Palette. This palette also almost made it into my top 10. The only reason this palette didn't is because it leaves me feeling a little bit stuck sometimes. There's just not quite enough variation between some of these shades. Like this Bonjour shade, Halftime, and Beauty Mark. They're beautiful light neutral shades, but there's very little variation between the three of them, especially once you get them on your eyes. I wish there was just more depth in them, and then a more color variation from light to dark. And then these two deeper browns, it's like I wish one of these was more of a taupe. I wish this one was a true medium brown. And I wish this one was a true dark brown. They're both just too warm, and again, once you get it on your eyes, they're just not what I want them to be. I wish there was just a little more differentiation between the tones. Aside from that, I love everything else in this palette. These are quite unique. I'm sure if you are someone who watches other eyeshadow collection videos, you've heard others say that these shimmers are more like topper shades. They're almost a little bit bouncy and wet to the touch. They're not true metallics, they're not true shimmers. So they are unique in that way. Again, I like that. There's a place for that in my eyeshadow collection. I do think that if they were true metallics, true shimmers, that this palette would have definitely been in my top 10. It's one that I have to think a little bit more when I'm using it, in which if I'm in a hurry, it's not a palette that I reach for. So for that reason, it doesn't get used as much. But when I do have the time and I do have the patience to play with this palette, I love everything that comes out of it. But again, to me, it's a little bit more finicky to work with because of the lack of color variety and some of these textures. It's not that they're hard to work with. Again, it's just you have to put more thought into it, you know? Whereas like I said, if they were true shimmers, true metallics, you could just slap it on your eye and be done. You have the flexibility to be more creative with these different textures and formulas, but that can also be a con because it also takes more time and more brain power to think about when doing your look, you know what I mean? Anyway, if you are attracted to this and you're debating on getting it, I would say get it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's a beautiful neutral color story. I do really truly think that it's a unique neutral color story, again, because of the different textures. I think if you're a beginner if you're new to makeup, don't get this palette. Don't start with this palette being your neutral palette. I think that this type of palette is going to be someone for a little bit more advanced, someone who has a little bit more patience and experience working with these different types of textures to know what to do with them. So if you are at that level and you're attracted to this color story, I say go for it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I do, like I said, I love this palette. Even though I just kind of ripped on it, I'm just pointing out the cons with it, just so that you know. Let's dive into my top 10 favorite eyeshadow palettes. If you have made it this far, know that I treasure your commitment and I appreciate you. It is a different day that I'm filming my top 10 on because I was losing good lighting, and so I am back. I am refreshed, revived, and I'm ready to talk about my top 10. Before we dive in, I need to tell you that this top 10 isn't in order, because there's not really a way to put these in order. Each of these palettes are my favorite for a different reason, whether it's because it's a palette that I use most often, or it's a formula, or because of the way it makes me feel. They all have different meaning to me, so I hope that isn't disappointing. I hope you enjoy watching nonetheless. Palette number 10, even though this isn't ranked my last place, it's just the place that I'm putting it. I'm putting it here because I think this will probably be the most boring for you as a viewer, even though me as the palette user, this would probably be my number one if I'm being honest, just because this one gets the most use. This palette I talked about in my Holy Grail 5 and 5 video I did in collaboration with Jennifer over at Magical Muses and Monthly Musings. I will link that video for you down below if you're interested, but I talked about this palette as one of my Holy Grail makeup products because it is a palette that I would repurchase if anything happened to it. It's just one that I use all of the time, almost every single day. This palette was the very first high-end palette that I ever purchased for myself, so it does have special meaning for me for that reason. But I purchased it because I wanted these neutral mattes in a good, reliable formula, and that it serves its purpose well. Obviously, you can see I put pan in many of these shades. If I were to repurchase this palette, though, I wouldn't repurchase the full-size Pro. I think they've got like a mini with just the mattes. Obviously, you can see I don't use the shimmers a whole lot, not because there's anything wrong with them by any means, just because they're just not quite as vibrant as I prefer my metallics and my shimmers to be. But anyway, like I said, I pull it out almost every single day. If I'm working with a palette that doesn't have like the perfect mid-tone taupe or the perfect medium brown, I of course reach for this one. It's just a good, reliable formula. This formula is a little bit powdery. However, generally, if a formula is on the powdery side, it's because it's pigmented. And I would much rather have a formula that is pigmented than not. Anyway, I just find that it's easy to work with. It's reliable because it is so pigmented. And this espresso shade is like the perfect cool tone dark brown. It's almost black, but it's just a little bit softer. I love this shade for deepening out my outer corner. I'll swatch some of these shimmers for you. Like I said, it's not that the shimmers are bad. Since we're talking about Lorac, I'm gonna put this as number 9. This is the Lorac and Rachel Zoe Hollywood Glamour Mini Palette. This was part of their holiday collection from 2019, I wanna say. They had, I wanna say like 4 or 5 of these mini palettes. I just picked up one and obviously it's in my top 10, so it's one of my favorites. There's nothing extraordinary about it. This color story I just find is very beautiful. It's very neutral but glamorous. Like I said, I really enjoy the Lorac eyeshadow formulas. I actually enjoy these shimmers just a little bit more than the shimmers in the Lorac 1 palette. I just find that they're a little bit more buttery. So this one is like a plummy burgundy. This one is a very light taupey lilac shade. I also find that all these colors work pretty well together. I'm sure I've mentioned it in this video already that I think that it's hard for me anyway to have a palette that I'm able to create a full look out of using that palette alone. I generally have to pull in another palette, specifically my Lorac Pro palette, but this is one that I'm able to do a complete look with, this palette alone. This gold shade here is one of my absolute favorite eyeshadows ever. Again, if I were to do a video on my favorite one and done eyeshadows, this would most definitely be in there.
There's just something so magical, so buttery and magnetic about it that when you put it on your eyes, it's just beautiful. I love to use this all over the lid. I especially love this shade as a halo eye. I don't know, maybe it's my coloring and my blue eyes. There's just something about it that just makes my eyes pop when I wear this shade. I love it. The mattes in here are typical buttery Lorac formula. This brown is like the perfect mid-tone brown. Not too warm, not too cool. It's just right. And then there is one pressed glitter in here. I don't mind pressed glitters. I'm pretty sure, again, I've mentioned in this video, in comparison to like the Colourpop pressed glitter shadows, I find that theirs are a little bit chunky. This is really finely milled glitter. So, I mean, it's still, you're putting glitter on your eyes. But I like that it's not chunky. I like that you can just pat it on your eye if you want just a little subtle glitter, or you can really pack it on like I'm doing here and go full glitz. This palette is still available to purchase on Amazon, I believe. It's $15, and I was just very recently on the Lorac website, and I'm fairly certain I remember seeing it on their website as well. So if you're interested, check it out. Next up, this is the Alter Ego Luster palette. I do have a video on my channel where I review this palette and I recreated a Pat McGrath look, since this palette is supposed to dupe a Pat McGrath Mothership palette. I believe it's the Mothership Divine Rose 1. Anyway, I love it. Even though this palette only has 2 mattes, and to be quite honest, these mattes aren't my favorite to work with. They're not very pigmented. They take quite a bit to build up. I would consider this palette to be more of a companion palette. I generally have to pull in another palette to work with. I mean, they swatch well, but they take a while to build up on the eyes. Anyway, when I open this palette, I just feel excited and inspired. If you haven't caught on already, I am deeply drawn to mauves and neutrals and sparkles, and I don't know that I've had too many duochromes in my palettes thus far. I have a lot of duochrome singles, but I am a sucker for a good duochrome, and this palette has 2 of them. There's just something about this palette that when I open it, I just want to play. It just makes me feel happy and excited. It's one that I feel I can grab almost any of these shadows and use it as a standalone shadow, or I can create a very beautiful, effortlessly glamorous look using multiple shades. This one, Magnifique, is one of my favorite shades. It's just like the perfect chocolate brown. It's so buttery, it goes on so smooth, it's beautiful on the eyes. The shade Radiant, I do find, is a very good duochrome. It shifts from pink to peach. If you watch my review video with this palette, my reaction is legit. I mean, it was my first time using the palette, and I was very impressed. It didn't take a whole lot to build up, and the shift was there. So anyway, I love this palette. It's very well done. I think they did a pretty good job of recreating Pat's color story with this Luster Charm palette. Since we just mentioned Pat McGrath, it only makes sense that this palette comes next. Pat is an artist that I have followed for quite some time. There's just something about her aesthetic that is so alluring to me. Everything that she creates, everything from the packaging to the actual color story,
Just everything.
the whole package to me is just mesmerizing and beautiful, and to me is a true work of art through and through. And coming from, I do consider myself an artist. I also a painter and photographer, and makeup is just another art form that I really truly enjoy. And to see a makeup artist to be able to deliver a product is not only a great product but also an experience, that is true art to me. So the outside packaging is beautiful, and then you open it up and you have the palette. This is super heavy. The most luxe packaged palette that I own. There is a nice beveled mirror in here. This color story is very me. I mean, you've got your neutrals, your golds, this beautiful blushy pink, the shimmers, the sparkles, the shifts. All of it is just so beautiful to me. I will be honest and I will say that as just a regular makeup beauty product consumer, I don't think her palettes are worth $125. I've actually found that her formula isn't my favorite. It is a little bit finicky to work with. I'll show you that in just a moment. I don't know that I would recommend it for the formula alone, because I think you can find a really great formula, a really beautiful color story for far less. However, if you are someone like me who appreciates the artistry, the mind magic that goes into all of this, who lusts for this sort of experience, you're gonna enjoy the palette. This is one of my favorite just neutral browns to reach for because it is so easy to work with. It's a shadow that is very pigmented, and you lay it down and it just is a smooth glide with your brush, and it'll go wherever you tell it to go, and it doesn't like patch up in any way. It's just a smooth glide, a smooth blend, and it lays down just beautifully. I find that to be true with the mattes in this palette. However, she's got 3 of these, I don't know what they would be called, more of like a shimmery type, metallic type shadow. I find that they almost have like what feels to be hard pan. It takes a lot to pick them up, this shade specifically. And it's unfortunate because it's really cool. It's like a really cool, like taupey pewter color. And then I lay it down and you see it like it's not really, there's not really anything happening there when I'm trying to blend it out. And so it's finicky to work with. I have to build it up, or I have to use a certain medium. But you know, that's where I find the trouble to recommend this to someone and say that it's worth the money, because for $125, you shouldn't have to work hard. This gold is a little bit better. However, the magic within the Mothership palettes are her special shades. Her special shades in this one, of course, being these 4 here on the end. This pink is one of my favorites. It's just your basic pink, but there is so much like fine glitter in there, and it's not like Colourpop chunky glitter. It's like mature, glamorous glitter. When it's on your eyes just shift with glimmer and shimmer in every direction. They are very unique. They are unique to Pat. The formula, the color, the shift, everything. I've never found anything quite as magical. I don't know if the camera's going to be able to pick up the shift and the sparkle. I wish I could show this to all of you in person, because there's nothing like it. And as someone who loves sparkle and loves shimmer, of course I have a lot of products, a lot of eyeshadows that have the sparkle and the shimmer, but it's just every time that I pull out this palette and use these shades, my jaw drops, because I forget just how special and unique they are. This is the Pretty Vulgar Nightingale eyeshadow palette. I believe this palette was sent out in like a BoxyCharm or maybe an Ipsy Glam Big Plus or something, and I was seeing so many people have this palette, and I was always just so jealous. I lusted after it because this is just a beautiful, neutral, cool tone color story. Again, just a hole that I was finding in my eyeshadow palette collection. I was missing just like a good, solid, cool tone neutral palette, and that's what I wanted, and this is exactly what I wanted. And I actually, where did I get this? I think I bought this from someone on Poshmark, and so the packaging is pretty beat up. However, when I received it, it's like the shadows had never ever been touched. And since getting it, it's one that I really enjoy using. It's another palette that I feel I can get a complete eye look out of. You've got a good mix of mattes and shimmers and a nice range of cool tones. The only thing that I think is missing, these 2 browns here. I wish this was a little bit lighter, a little bit more of like a mid-tone. I find that they're both on the deeper side of a brown. I do find that the formula of this palette is easy to work with. I would almost relate it to the Lorac formula. There's nothing super special about this palette, however, that's why I love it. That is why it is in my top 10, because it's just a basic neutral color story, but it's all cool toned. And I find that's hard to find. I think it's becoming a little bit easier to find because I think cool tone's a little bit more trendy right now. But anyway, I really enjoy this palette. I think the formula, I don't have an issue with any of the shades. It's a well done cool tone palette, and it's one I pull out every time I want to do a cool tone look. Palette number 5, halfway there guys, halfway there. Again, this one I also feel is going to be boring because not only is this another neutral palette, but this is also a really old palette. This is the Coastal Scents Revealed 2 palette. This one is actually new to me. I purchased this a couple months ago and I love it so much. This would be a palette, remember how like an hour ago when I was talking about the e.l.f. mini bite-sized palettes, how instead of getting those minis, I would recommend paying a couple more dollars and getting a better but still affordable palette that has a better, more reliable formula and just a better range of colors. This is one of the palettes that I would recommend. This palette is still pretty affordable. I believe it's 15 bucks. I did get mine on Amazon. There are 20 shadows in here. 8 of them, I believe, are mattes and the rest are just shimmers. So I appreciate that it's just a very straightforward palette. You know, I have a lot of palettes in my collection where I've talked about the different textures. I love that this is just straightforward. You have mattes or you have shimmers. I know exactly what to do with them. I know exactly how to work with them. It's just an easy palette to use. I'm sure you've caught on by now that I'm definitely attracted to this sort of color story, more of like the mauves and like the purpley pinks. These shimmers are very buttery and easy to blend out. This is one of my favorite shades in the palette. This is like the perfect mid-tone, like plummy brown. I know that it's exciting to hear about new releases and to get new makeup, but I love going back and looking at older makeup and looking at just something like this, something that is so basic that you don't really see a whole lot anymore because brands are trying to be so creative with their color stories. And not only are we playing with different color variations, but now we're playing with different textures. And I think that there's just something about having just a good staple neutral palette in your collection. And for me, this is one of them. This one, along with the Lorac Pro, you know, that one is just more your neutral tones. This one is obviously more mauve and more pink, but I had to include this in my top 10 because it's one of my favorites. It's one that gets pulled out often. Like I said, every shade in here works beautifully. I would recommend it, especially for the price. I'm going to talk about this one next because just like the Coastal Scents Revealed palette, this is another palette that I would recommend getting over the e.l.f. bite-sized minis. This is the LA Girl 9-pan Keep It Playful eyeshadow palette. I believe they've got 3 or 4 of them in this line. And I think they're kind of supposed to dupe the Huda Beauty Obsessions palette, this one obviously being the Smoky Obsessions. I did actually have the Huda Beauty Smoky Obsessions. However, when I received it, the black was broken and I ended up just discarding that shadow completely. And I even though I really liked it, I loved it actually. I loved the color story. There were a couple shades in there that were very, very similar and they were almost too deep for my complexion that I found that I wasn't reaching for it as much as I would have wanted to. Anyway, I picked this up and used it a couple times and found that I really enjoyed this one so much more because there is more differentiation between all of these shades, and I ended up actually just throwing away my Smoky Obsessions because half the shades were broken anyway. I will say these mattes, they're a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, almost like kind of dry, but you know, again, this was a $10 palette, so I will take it. I just love that there are 4 mattes and there are 4 shimmers, and there is enough color variation between the mattes and the shimmers, enough that I feel that I can create a few different neutral looks with this. Every time that I pull out this palette, I know exactly what I want to do. It's very straightforward. You know, the mattes aren't as pigmented as I would want them to be, but they are buildable and they're workable. Where I think this palette really shines though are these shimmers here. This brown is one of my favorite shades ever. I keep referencing this one and done eyeshadow video that is not yet in existence, but apparently maybe I need to make it be real because I keep talking about it. Anyway, this shade would definitely be in there. It's just the perfect milk chocolate metallic brown. It's beautiful. This one also is just like a beautiful taupey neutral color. Very reminiscent to the shades that are in the Smoky Obsessions. Again, I don't feel that this is a formula dupe by any means, but color story wise, I would say it's pretty darn close. And actually for me, I prefer this one better. Again, like I said, because I felt like the mattes in that palette, the Smoky Obsessions, were almost too deep for my complexion. We're entering the top 3. This is the Dose of Colors Cutting Edge Eyeshadow Palette. I love this. I'm so happy that I bought this. I really debated for a long time because this is expensive. $32 for 5 shades is a bit steep. Even though there are only 5 shades in this palette, all 5 of these shades have their place. This is such a well done 5-pan eyeshadow palette. It's easy actually to do a full look with these 5 shades alone. And even though it looks like it's kind of basic, you know, you've got the gold, you've got an orange, you've got a army green, you know, you can find those colors everywhere. There's just something special about these specific shades. They're different, and I can't pinpoint quite what it is, but it's unique to this palette alone. And every time that I use this palette, I am just in awe of the look that I'm able to create because they're easy to work with and the colors are just beautiful. And again, like I said, these shades all play so well together. This orange is almost like a burnt terracotta pumpkin type orange. This gold is almost got like a green shift to it in some light. It's really cool. This shade especially just has a way of catching the light and making your eyes and your eye look next level. Like I said, I almost see a green in some lights, but now once it's swatched out on my arm, there's definitely gold. There's definitely a bit of an orange shift to it. And then the creme of the creme, to me, this was of course, the shade that I was most drawn to because I was on a mission to find the most perfect pukey, yellow, poopy brown shade. And this is another one that, just well done. I know I'm not alone in this obsession with pukey yellow and poopy green colors, so please leave a comment down below if you are also obsessed with this sort of eyeshadow shade. Anyway, it was no question to me that this had to be in my top 10. Even though it's, like I said, it's your basic orange, your basic green. Isn't there just something so special about all of these shades? I mean, all together, they're a beautiful family, but even as individual shades, there's just something about each of them that is so special. I can't quite put my finger on it, but they're just beautiful. And again, being someone who's not into packaging, this is ideal. This is sleek, it's small, it's compact. Palette number 2, this is the Revolution Beauty Quartz palette. I do believe there were 3, maybe 4 palettes within this line. I chose this one because it was the most neutral, of course. It's definitely a companion palette. There's no mattes in here. These are all like shimmer topper type shadows. The formula of all 12 of these shadows is very similar to the Colourpop Super Shock eyeshadows, if you're familiar. They're almost like bouncy and wet to the touch. But this palette gets used actually a couple times a week. It's one that I will use if I'm like going to the gym in the morning or just running errands. I'll grab one of these shades and put it all over my lid, put on some mascara and head out the door. It's just a palette of perfect, beautiful, neutral, one and done eyeshadows. This shade is pretty cool. It's one of the duochromes in the palette. It's almost got like a pinky, red, purple shift to it. The only thing is that there are a couple shades in here that are quite similar. One of them being actually these 3. Another 2 being these 2, they're quite similar. This one is almost just like an icy, like white gold shade. This is also just like another great companion palette if you finish your eye look and you feel like you're just missing something, to grab one of these shades and to put it just in the center of your lid or maybe on your brow bone or in your inner corner of your eye. I will say I don't think they're quite as sparkly and shimmery and vibrant as some of the Colourpop Super Shocks. I don't feel like they're swatching the best, to be honest, but they apply nicely to your eyes, and I just love using it. Like I said, great for quick out the door looks or for just adding that final touch to any look. All right, we have made it to the last of the top 10. It is the Nabla Platinum Cutie palette. I love this palette. I remember at one point there was a trendy beauty YouTube video that was makeup that makes me feel beautiful or makeup that makes me feel glamorous or something. If I were to do that video, this was the palette that I would use because there's just something so special about this formula, these shades, the way that they appear on my eyes that just makes me feel sultry, sexy, gorgeous, bombshell-esque. I just love it so, so much. I love actually this formula more than I do the Nabla Side by Side palette. There are 2 mattes in here. This is just a beautiful black and brown. I like that it's not black, it's just a little bit softer for smoking out the outer portion of my eye. These mattes are so smooth. There's not a lot of pickup. They're easy to work with. This shade, Rich Darling, is one of my favorites. Again, it's just a beautiful milk chocolate metallic, but it looks like velvet on your eyes. And this shadow has a way of catching the light that I don't even know how to describe it. It has a way of catching the light when you wear it that just draws attention to your eyes and again, just makes them look sultry and so sexy and just mesmerizing. I love this shade. This one also, Gem System. Same thing. I like that you can do just a light dusting if you just want to tap it on your eye, or you can build it up and have it be more pigmented and lustrous. Look at that sparkle. Again, it's not like obvious glitter flecks. It is this absolute gorgeous, glamorous shade on your eyes that just makes you look rich. And last but not least, the shade Luxuriance. This shade was actually the reason why I put off buying this palette because I don't like silvers. Just don't like the way silver shows up on my eyes. And so I thought, you know, for however much money this is full price, already going into it knowing that one shade I'm not going to use, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And in the end, this is one of my favorite shades because just like the other metallics in this palette, you can tap it on for a light dusting or you can build it up to be this beautiful aluminum shade on your eyes. It's so cool. And again, it's not like over the top. Like when I'm saying over the top shimmer glitter like this, I'm thinking of Colourpop because they do a really great job with having pigmented shadows, but it's easy for it to be too much product on your eyes to the point where I feel that it does kind of cheapen the overall finishing look if you're not careful. This, like I said, I can build this shadow up, and because it's so fine, you can build the color up, but it doesn't look over the top. It doesn't look cheap. It looks expensive. It looks rich. It looks luxurious. It makes your eyes just beautiful and dazzling. I just think even though this is a 6-pan palette, there's just so much you can do with this because you can go over the top with these shades. You can tap it on if you want just a light dusting of shimmer. I love using the shade on the inner corner of my eye, even a little bit on my brow bone or on my cheekbones for just a little shimmer. I love it. I enjoy this palette so much. I'm so happy that I purchased it and honestly would pay full price for it because it is that good. Alright guys, that completes my eyeshadow palette collection. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you hung in this long, I appreciate you so much. I'm so happy to have shared my collection with you. I hope you enjoyed watching. Let me know down below your thoughts, your opinions. Do you have any of these palettes? Which ones do you like? Which ones didn't you like? What palettes are on your wish list? Are you a neutral guy or gal like I am? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. Thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you hit that subscribe button so you can come back next time. And until next time, I hope you have the most wonderful day. We've got 2 left. Hey, what are you doing up there? Hey, hey you. What are you doing? I'm almost done. I know. Almost done. Come here. Oh, good boy. 2 more. 2 more and then we'll go, okay?